Joint diseases today are not only found in the elderly but young men and women also have these problems, and our nutrition is one of the most important factors that affect the health of our joints. Our joints and cartilage and ligaments are very complex anatomical entities. They need appropriate care and attention throughout their lives. In this video, I've compiled the foods that are bad for our joints and that we need to eliminate from our diet. If you already have pain, you need to do it right away. But if you don't already have pain, you need to know for prevention purposes, so it doesn't come sometime in the future. Item number 1 is phosphates and any foods that are rich in them. What are phosphates? It's a salt of phosphoric acid. Of course, the body also needs some phosphate in order to support the natural processes of life. But, as they say, everything in moderation. Too much phosphate can upset the calcium balance in the body, upset our calcium balance, and in order to somehow compensate for that balance, the body starts taking calcium from our bones. That's when osteoporosis and dental problems develop, reduced density of our cartilage and so on. So we need to pay attention to how much phosphate do we eat. What needs to be eliminated first? It's processed meats. This includes various sausages and wieners, hams, sausages, and so on. That is processed meat, not natural, but treated in a factory. The fact that eating sausages, we can easily exceed the daily requirement for phosphates in our body just by eating this meal. And as additional side effects, we can get slower metabolism. Because of this, we can gain excess weight. We can also get apathy and impaired functioning of our cardiovascular system. In fact, speaking of the dangers of processed meat, I've said many times on this channel that in general, we should give up sausages and wieners and sausages in favor of real, normal meat. Moreover, phosphates are not only found in processed meat, but also in other foods. For example, it's crab sticks. If you think crab sticks are made from crab meat, I have to disappoint you. There are also a lot of phosphates in processed cheese. By the way, processed cheese, unlike normal, real, quality cheese, is also not a healthy alternative. This would also include different sauces, chips, products in cans, carbonated beverages, and many instant products, that is semi-finished products in general. Of course, these foods need to be eliminated from our diet, not only for reasons of keeping our joints, cartilage, and ligaments healthy, because they also affect the cardiovascular system and the permanent processes of microinflammation and so on. Therefore, even if the knees do not hurt, all the same it is better to exclude them, and if they really hurt, then all the more. The next point is a variety of pickles and smoked foods. Of course, if we are talking about a healthy diet, then in any healthy diet, it's, you could say, what a taboo. And we all know that smoked fish and pickled mushrooms, if we actively eat them, can very quickly turn into stomach pain. But the problem with an upset stomach doesn't end, because our joints are suffering just as much. And there's more than one reason. First of all, the same phosphates are there. And secondly, these foods contain excessive amounts of salt. There's a debate about whether salt is bad or good for you, but the answer, in fact, is, salt, of course, is useful and necessary within reasonable limits. This is from 2 to 5 grams of salt per day. Less than 2 grams is bad, and more than 5 is also bad. Here's the golden mean, 2 to 5. But, whenever we consume a variety of smoked foods and pickles, with just one meal, we can double our daily salt requirements. And what does this lead to? Our joints will lose flexibility, swelling will develop, and over time, they will become less and less mobile. Also, if this diet causes us to gain weight, it puts even more strain on the musculoskeletal system. The next item is tea and coffee, but here again, it is necessary to make a reservation. Within reasonable limits, tea and coffee will be useful rather than harmful. But what is a reasonable limit? Here begin the nuances and the individual characteristics of the body. So, tea and coffee contain a lot of purines. These are the chemicals that play a role in the formation of our DNA molecules. And of course, if we have a serious lack of purines, it's going to lead to a lot of health problems. The same can be said about the excess consumption of purines. So it's the same with purines as it is with salt. You need a middle ground. If we drink too much tea and coffee, 5 cups or more a day, we get very high levels of purine. We have very high levels of uric acid in our bodies, and then the uric acid crystals start to deposit on the cartilage and the vascular membranes, and this can lead to gout. Of course, if you drink a cup of coffee or a couple of cups of tea a day and you feel fine and your joints don't hurt, then I'm not going to discourage you in any way. But if you have problems with your joints and you do drink a lot of tea or coffee throughout the day, then there's a reason to think about cutting down on it. Consumption. It should also be said that besides coffee and tea, purines are also found in other foods. These are fish, especially fatty varieties. These are legumes, although, of course, this is not a reason to completely give up legumes and fatty fish, because, in general, it is a healthy products. There are also a lot of purines in sodas, byproducts, mushrooms, spicy and smoked foods, also in chocolate. Sorrel. Is sorrel such bad food? Actually, sorrel is healthy. It's a very good herb. It has a good dose of magnesium, vitamin B6, and iron. And overall, no nutritionalist would say that sorrel is bad, but there is one but. If we eat sorrel fresh, then everything is fine. But if we subject it to heat treatment, which is fried, stewed, steamed, and baked, then oxalic acid begins to react with the calcium. The result in organic salt is formed, which is very difficult for our body to absorb. It can begin to settle, for example, in the form of kidney stones. Further, inflammation can occur, including in our joints. So, of course, you should not stop eating sorrel, but if you eat it in a thermally processed form, then here you should think about it. It is better to eat fresh sorrel than cooked, especially if you already have joint problems. The next point is sweets and especially pastries. About the harm of sugar has not told only lazy people. I've also been told many times on my channel that sugar is the main pro-inflammatory factor in our nutrition. Sugar provokes permanent microinflammation, including in our joints. Also, sugar disrupts collagen synthesis and contributes to its destruction. And collagen is the main building material of our connective tissue. That is our skin as well as cartilage and tendons. Therefore, sugar is the enemy of our joints. But why did I include highlighted baked goods in particular? Because baked goods are sugar plus yeast. So if we eat sugar and yeast together, we get a massive dose of the same purines, which in turn provokes gout. That's why nutritionalists recommend renouncing these confectionery products, various sweet buns and so on. But if you have problems with joints, then you should think about it even more seriously. Dear friends, please write about what from this you eat, or maybe you refused something from this list. Sharing your opinions or experiences would be interesting, and I highly recommend you watch my other video where I talk about the top 6 foods that are good for your joints. Thank you for your likes, comments, and subscriptions. You'll find a lot more useful information below the video. All the best to you.